Some mornings feel heavier than others, like the air itself remembers every failure I've ever made. That morning was one of them. The diner was half empty. Same flickering neon sign buzzing like a dying heartbeat. The smell of burnt coffee and grease clung to everything, even my skin. I'd been here 5 years, trapped between refills and fake smiles, watching strangers chase lives I could never afford. I always told myself, it's just until I save enough. But I never did. My tip jar stayed as empty as my promises. The bell over the door jingled, sharp, confident. The kind of sound money makes when it walks in wearing cologne and arrogance. A man in a tailored gray suit stepped inside. His watch probably cost more than my car. His shoes didn't squeak, they glided. He wasn't like the usual truckers or locals who came for cheap pancakes. He was too polished, too perfect. The kind of man who never had to check a price tag. He took a booth near the window, sunlight catching the gold of his cufflinks. 3 other men followed him, all laughing like they owned the air they breathed. I grabbed my notepad, plastered on a tired smile, and walked over. "Good morning," I said. "What can I get you gentlemen?" He didn't look up right away, just scrolled through his phone, lips twitching with a private smirk. When he finally met my eyes, something about his gaze made my stomach tighten. It wasn't attraction. It was the way rich people look at waitresses, like they're checking a price tag on a human being. "Coffee," he said finally. "Black. And make it quick." His voice was smooth, trained, the kind that made people listen. I nodded and turned toward the counter, pretending I didn't feel invisible. Behind me, one of his friends chuckled. "Hayes, you're slumming it today, huh? What are we doing in a dump like this?" Their laughter carried across the room. I could feel every syllable stick to my back like grease. I poured the coffee carefully, trying not to spill. But my hands shook. Not from fear, just from anger. People like them never realized how small they made others feel. When I brought the mugs to their table, he leaned back in his seat and watched me like I was part of his morning entertainment. "So tell me, sweetheart," he said, lips curling into that practiced smirk. "What would you do with $1 billion? The table burst into laughter. The kind of laughter that fills the room and crushes the silence like glass. Froze. For a moment I wanted to walk away, to keep my head down like I always did. But something in me snapped. Maybe the 5 years of swallowing my pride, or the ache of knowing I'd never have enough. I set the coffee pot down. The sound echoed between us. I met his eyes, cold, confident, untouchable. Then I smiled, but it wasn't the polite kind. It was the kind that hides a storm. "I'd buy some manners," I said softly. "Seems like they're more expensive than I thought." Silence. Then one of his friends choked on his laughter. Another cleared his throat, pretending to check his watch. But Mr. Hayes didn't laugh. He just stared at me, his jaw tight, as if no one had ever dared to talk back to him before. For a second I thought he might yell, or walk out. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out something, and placed it on the table. A sleek white business card, his name embossed in silver. "Keep the advice," he said quietly. His voice low now, unreadable. "You might need it." He stood, dropped a 20 on the table. Not for me but to prove he could, and walked out with his entourage. I looked down at the card. Alexander Hayes. CEO, Hayes Global Investments. The bell jingled again as the door shut behind them. The room felt emptier than before. I stared at that card like it was a joke I didn't understand. Why would a billionaire hand his card to a waitress? Then I looked at the $20 bill beside it. Untouched. No tip. Just a challenge I hadn't asked for. I remember whispering to myself, "You'll forget him by tomorrow." But I didn't. Because that same name, Alexander Hayes, would soon turn my entire world upside down. Cliffhanger, he smirked at me and said, "Tell me, sweetheart, what would you do with $1 billion? Money has a sound, sharp, confident, careless." That's what his laughter felt like that morning. Alexander Hayes had asked me what I'd do with $1 billion. He didn't want an answer. He wanted a performance. Another moment to remind the room who had power and who didn't. The other men at his table leaned in, grinning. One of them whispered, "Come on, sweetheart, don't be shy." Their voices mixed with the hiss of the coffee machine and the hum of the ceiling fan, all part of the same cruel rhythm. I wanted to walk away, to keep my dignity, to stay invisible. But something inside me refused. Maybe it was the hunger for respect. Maybe just exhaustion from being laughed at for too long. I looked him straight in the eye. "You really want to know what I'd do with $1 billion?" He leaned back in his seat, that amused little smile still playing on his lips. "Sure. Enlighten me." The diner went quiet. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hold its breath. "I'd buy every diner like this one," I said. "Not to own them, but to pay off every waitress's debt. To make sure no one ever has to smile at a man who laughs while asking questions he doesn't want answers to." For a moment no one moved. His friends' grins faltered. The air turned heavy, thick with something none of them could joke away. Hayes's smile froze, not because he was angry, but because he didn't know how to respond. The silence stretched. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my throat. Then he chuckled slow and low. "You've got guts," he said. "And a sharp tongue." "Just honesty," I replied. He looked at me as if weighing something invisible, a line between curiosity and irritation. "You think honesty pays bills?" "No," I said quietly. "But it buys sleep." For a second our eyes locked, mine tired and defiant, his amused and searching. Then his friend broke the tension. "Let it go, Hayes," he said with a smirk. "She's just a waitress." Those words hit harder than they should have. Just a waitress. It was always that, like my entire existence could fit in one cheap word. Hayes didn't correct him. He just reached for his cup, took a slow sip and set it back down. Then he did something unexpected. He nodded at me like he'd just found a puzzle worth solving. When I turned to walk away, I heard him say softly to his friend, "Sometimes the poorest people have the richest words." I didn't know whether that was praise or mockery. Maybe both. At the counter I tried to steady my breathing. The air smelled like overcooked eggs and bruised pride. I busied myself wiping tables that didn't need cleaning, hoping the moment would dissolve like spilled sugar. But I could still feel his eyes on me. Steady, unreadable. A few minutes later they stood to leave. His friends were back to laughing, pretending nothing had happened. But he lagged behind, sliding his wallet from his pocket. I didn't expect a tip. Men like him didn't give out kindness without a receipt. When I cleared their table, my eyes caught a small white rectangle under the coffee cup. His business card. Smooth, heavy paper, embossed in silver. Alexander Hayes, CEO, Hayes Global Investments. No cash, no tip, just that card. First I thought it was another joke, a reminder of the gap between us. But when I flipped it over, my breath caught. Scrawled on the back in sharp black ink were 3 words. "Call if you dare." I stood there staring at it, the card trembling between my fingers. Was it an invitation? Or a warning? Either way, I knew one thing. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Cliffhanger, he didn't leave a tip, but he left his business card, and a challenge I couldn't ignore. The call came when I was scraping ketchup off a cracked plate. If I'd ignored it, my life would have stayed exactly the same. Small, predictable, safe. But I didn't. "Is this Miss Emily Carter?" The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, the kind that didn't waste words. "Yes, who's asking?" "This is Lila from Hayes Global Investments. Mr. Hayes would like to meet with you this afternoon." Actually laughed. "You're joking, right?" "No, ma'am," she said, completely serious. "He wants to hear more of your financial advice." For a second, I just stood there with the phone pressed to my ear, the clatter of the diner fading into silence. Was this some elaborate prank? Another test of humility for their amusement? But she repeated the address. Downtown, top floor, Hayes Tower. My chest tightened. I'd seen that building before. It glittered against the skyline like a mirror meant to blind the poor. When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the napkin dispenser. Messy bun, cheap uniform, tired eyes. Joke. That's what this was. And yet, something in me whispered, go anyway. By 2 p.m. I was standing in front of the skyscraper. The glass shimmered like it had its own pulse. Inside, everything smelled of wealth. Cold, sterile, expensive. The floor was polished so clean I could see the cracks in my shoes reflected back at me. The receptionist didn't even look up. Name: Emily Carter. Mr. Hayes is expecting me. That got her attention. Her eyes flicked up, scanning me like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't fit. One moment. A minute later, an elevator door opened with a soft chime. A woman in a navy suit, Lila I guessed, smiled politely. Mr. Hayes will see you now. I followed her in. The elevator walls were mirrored. I caught glimpses of myself between the reflections, a waitress in a palace made of glass. As the numbers climbed, so did my heartbeat. When the doors opened, the view nearly stole my breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, skyscrapers fading into a silver horizon. The office itself was minimalist. Sharp edges, dark wood, not a thing out of place. And there he was, Alexander Hayes. No suit jacket this time. Just a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, forearms resting on a desk the size of my apartment. He didn't look up immediately. Just kept signing something, pen moving in deliberate strokes. Finally, his voice, low, measured. You actually came. I almost didn't, I admitted. He looked up then, and for a fleeting second, something in his expression softened. Maybe surprise. Maybe curiosity. Then it was gone. Sit. I sat, hands tight in my lap, pretending not to notice how my uniform stuck out in this marble and glass world. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You embarrassed me in front of my partners, you know that? I met his gaze. You asked a question. I answered. He smirked. You call that an answer? You lectured a billionaire about kindness. Someone had to. His eyebrow arched, just a little, as if no one ever dared to speak to him that way. Then he leaned forward. So tell me, Miss Carter, what makes a waitress think she understands money better than the people who print it? Took a breath. Because I know what happens when people don't have it. The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. His smirk faltered again, replaced by something unreadable. For a moment, silence filled the room, the kind that vibrates, almost alive. Then he stood and walked to the window, staring out over the city like it belonged to him. You've got nerve, he said quietly. That's rare. I'm not here for a job, I replied. If this is a joke. He turned back, cutting me off with a raised hand. Do I look like I'm joking? I swallowed hard. His eyes were steady, calculating but not cruel. There was something else there, maybe the smallest trace of respect. He walked back to the desk, picked up a folder and dropped it in front of me. The sound echoed like a gavel. Let's see, he said slowly, a faint challenge curling his lips. If you're as smart as your mouth makes you sound. I could feel their eyes before I even entered the room. That thick silence, the kind that hums with judgment, hit me harder than any insult could. He'd said, let's see if you're as smart as your mouth makes you sound. I didn't think he meant this. The elevator opened onto a floor of glass and chrome. 12 people sat around a long, gleaming table, all dressed in sharp suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I froze in the doorway, clutching my purse like a shield. Gentlemen, this is Miss Emily Carter, Alexander announced, his tone casual, but I could hear the edge in it. She's going to give us her perspective. There was polite laughter, the kind people use when they want to hide cruelty. I wanted to disappear. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might echo in the room. Every face turned toward me, curious, smug, waiting for me to make a fool of myself. Please, he said, motioning toward an empty chair at the end of the table. Sit. The chair squeaked as I pulled it back. My hands were trembling. I tried to steady them in my lap, but the shaking wouldn't stop. He handed me a folder, graphs, numbers, forecasts, all printed on heavy paper that smelled expensive. "Tell us what's wrong with this," he said. I looked down, scanning the pages. My brain screamed, "You don't belong here." The men around the table shifted impatiently. One of them, an older executive with silver hair and a smirk, leaned back and whispered just loud enough, "Is this a social experiment, Alex?" Laughter rippled again. I wanted to run. I should have run. But something in me snapped instead. I looked up and said quietly, "You're going to lose money." That shut them up. Alexander tilted his head. "Go on. You're investing in markets where people are already drowning in debt," I said, flipping through the pages with trembling fingers. "You call it growth, but it's just taking advantage of the desperate. And desperate people don't stay loyal. They walk away. They break. And when they break, your profits break with them." For a moment no one moved. Then the older man laughed again, this time sharper. "That's not economics, sweetheart. That's sentiment." I met his eyes. "It's reality." The room went dead quiet again. Alexander leaned back in his chair, watching me like he'd just discovered something unexpected. "So what do you suggest, Miss Carter?" I swallowed hard. My voice steadied. "Invest in people, not in their pain. You want long-term success. Build trust. Give them a reason to believe in you. Profits follow loyalty, not the other way around." My palms were slick with sweat, but the words kept coming, like they'd been waiting inside me for years, finally finding air. For the first time no one interrupted. No one laughed. Even the sound of the air conditioner faded beneath the weight of the silence. When I finished, I realized I was breathing too fast. My cheeks were hot, my throat tight. I'd said too much. I was sure of it. Then Alexander started clapping. Slowly, deliberately. The sound echoed off the glass walls until the others hesitantly joined in. A few of them even nodded, pretending they'd understood all along. I wanted to smile, but I didn't trust it. The applause felt surreal, like I'd stumbled into someone else's dream. After the meeting, Alexander caught up with me by the elevator. "You did well," he said. "Better than I expected." I tried to meet his gaze. "You set me up to fail." He didn't deny it. "Sometimes failure shows character. You surprised me instead." "Was that a compliment?" "Don't get used to it." He smiled just faintly. I couldn't help it, I laughed. A real laugh this time. For the first time in years, I felt something that almost resembled pride. As I waited for the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored doors. Same uniform, same tired eyes, but something behind them had changed. Spark, maybe. Beginning. When the doors opened, I stepped in, heart still racing. The applause still echoed faintly in my ears. I thought that was the end of it. But as I passed the open door of his office, I heard a voice. Soft, mocking, the kind of voice that drips with entitlement. "She's just a waitress, darling," a woman said, laughter laced in poison. "Don't embarrass yourself." I didn't need to look to know who she was. His fiancée, perfectly dressed, perfectly cruel. And just like that, the spark in me turned into something else entirely. A fire I couldn't ignore. I wasn't supposed to be there that early. But fate doesn't check schedules before dropping secrets in your lap. The morning after the boardroom meeting, I walked into the skyscraper lobby with a mix of dread and pride tangled in my stomach. I had promised myself it would be my last visit. A quiet thank you, maybe an apology for standing out too much. But the universe had other plans. The air smelled like polished marble and expensive perfume. The kind that clings to people who've never had to count change before buying coffee. I recognized the scent before I even saw her. Mr. Hayes's fiancée, the woman in red. She stood near the fountain, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp and trembling. "I told you today. He can't know about this, do you understand?" Her tone made my chest tighten. She wasn't the graceful socialite I'd seen before. She was frantic, almost scared. I slowed my pace, pretending to admire the flower arrangement near the entrance. Her back was to me, but her reflection glimmered faintly in the marble wall. Then another figure stepped up beside her, a man in a black coat, face hidden by a cap. She lowered her voice, glanced around once, then pulled an envelope from her purse. Heavy. She pressed it into his hand like it burned her fingers. Half now, she whispered. Half when it's done. The man nodded and slipped it into his jacket. My heart stopped. I don't even know why. I'd seen people exchange money before. But something in her voice, the tremor in her hands, the desperation in her eyes reflected in that glass wall. It told me this wasn't just business. I turned away, trying to walk toward the elevator. I didn't want to be involved. I'd had enough of rich people's problems for a lifetime. But then I heard it. 5 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about them. Make sure no one finds out about the offshore accounts. Froze. The words hit me like cold water down my spine. Offshore accounts. Hidden money. Fraud. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. It was like standing in the middle of someone else's secret storm. And I was suddenly holding the umbrella. The man muttered something I couldn't hear and walked out the revolving door. She stood there for a moment, shoulders stiff, before fixing her lipstick in the reflection of the marble column, as if the scene hadn't happened at all. I stared at her, disbelief twisting in my gut. She looked perfect again. Polished. A woman who would never dirty her hands, even when she just had. I turned toward the elevator, heart still pounding. My brain screamed, "Walk away, Emily. This isn't your world." But curiosity is a dangerous thing. It burns hotter than fear. And then I felt it. That prickling sensation of being watched. I turned my head slowly toward the security desk. And there he was, Alexander Hayes, standing just beyond the glass partition, coffee in hand, staring straight at me, her eyes locked. His expression unreadable. No smirk this time, no arrogance. Just silence. For a second I thought maybe he'd seen the whole thing. Maybe he'd come over, demand to know what I'd overheard. But he didn't move. He just watched me, his gaze steady, sharp, searching. My pulse hammered in my throat. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Did he know I'd heard her? Did he want me to hear? The elevator doors slid open behind me with a soft chime, but I couldn't step inside. I was rooted to the marble floor, caught between guilt and a truth I didn't yet understand. Then, slowly, he set down his coffee and started walking toward me. His footsteps echoed through the lobby. Steady, deliberate, too calm for the storm that was about to break. And in that moment I realized something terrifying. Whatever secret his fiancée was hiding, I was now part of it. I didn't sleep that night. His eyes had followed me all the way out of that marble lobby. Sharp, unreadable, like he was trying to decide if I was a threat or a savior. The next morning his assistant called again. Same calm tone. "Mr. Hayes would like to meet with you. Privately." My hands shook when I hung up. Part of me wanted to ignore it, crawl back into the safety of my little apartment, where burnt coffee and unpaid bills were my biggest problems. But curiosity, and something deeper, wouldn't let me. By noon I was back inside that building. The guards already knew my name. That scared me more than anything. His office was different this time. No crowd of executives, no polite smiles. Just him, leaning against the glass window that overlooked the city. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled up, tie loose. He looked less like a billionaire, more like a man who hadn't slept in days. He didn't waste time. "I know what you saw," he said quietly. The words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to deny it, but he held up a hand. "Don't bother. I saw your face. You heard enough to know something's wrong." The silence between us was thick, filled with the hum of the city far below. "I'm not the one hiding anything," he continued, voice low. "But someone close to me is. And if you repeat what you heard, you could ruin everything." I crossed my arms, trying to mask how nervous I was. Then why call me back? Why not just make me sign some legal thing and send me away? He turned to face me, eyes narrowing slightly. "Because I don't trust anyone else in that building. And because you don't care who I am." That last line landed deep. He was right, I didn't care. Not really. I'd seen too many powerful men use money to fix their messes. But there was something in his voice, something tired and raw, that didn't sound like arrogance. I stepped closer. You think I can help? I make lattes and wipe tables for tips. He smiled faintly, not the cocky grin from the diner, but something smaller, almost grateful. Sometimes the people furthest from the money see the clearest. The room was cold, sunlight bouncing off steel and glass. I could see my reflection behind him, a waitress in a cheap blouse, standing in the office of a man who could buy 1,000 versions of her. I should have walked away. But instead I whispered, "What do you need from me?" He moved to his desk, picked up a folder and placed it in front of me. The papers inside looked official. Bank statements, internal memos, legal drafts. My stomach twisted when I saw the names. Some were from the board members I'd seen in that meeting. Others were offshore accounts. The same phrase his fiancée had used. "I need someone to go through these," he said. "Find the pattern. Someone's been moving money through shell companies. Quietly, carefully, but not carefully enough." I stared at the papers. My hands trembled. "You want me to investigate your company? I want you to tell me what's wrong," he said simply. "Not as an expert. As someone who isn't bought." Sounded insane. I wanted to laugh, but his face stopped me. There was no joke there. No trick. Just desperation hidden behind control. "You're serious," I said. He nodded once. "Completely." A long silence stretched between us. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a crisp contract. Thick paper, gold edges. My name already typed at the top. "Everything's legal," he said. "Confidentiality, compensation, and one rule." He pushed it toward me, eyes locking onto mine. "If you lie once, you're gone." The words hit harder than the money written at the bottom line. I looked at the pen lying beside it. My reflection shimmered faintly on the desk surface. A waitress who'd once counted coins for bus fare, now staring at $1 billion secret. I could feel the weight of choice pressing down on me. If I said yes, I'd step into a world built on lies, and maybe get crushed by them. If I said no, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what truth I'd walked away from. I reached out slowly, picked up the pen and whispered, "What if I find something you don't want to hear?" His jaw tightened. "Then tell me anyway." I hesitated, then signed my name. For a moment he smiled, but it wasn't relief. It was something darker. Like he'd just set a chain of events in motion that neither of us could stop. And as I slid the paper back toward him, I realized this wasn't an offer. It was a test. Trust is a strange thing. It doesn't shatter all at once. It cracks quietly like glass under pressure. For weeks I lived inside his world. The marble floors, the glass walls, the endless hum of secrets being whispered through phone lines. I'd gone from waitress to consultant overnight, and with every passing day, I felt the weight of that word tightening around me. Alexander and I work side by side most nights. His shirt sleeves rolled, tie discarded, eyes fixed on the data I printed in stacks. We didn't talk much, but there was something in the silence, a rhythm. He'd bring me coffee, black and strong, like he remembered how I liked it. I'd point out anomalies in spreadsheets that his accountants missed. He started to trust me. Or maybe I wanted to believe he did. Some nights I caught him looking at me. Not in the way rich men look at women they can buy, but with something like guilt. Or maybe gratitude. One night, as the city lights blinked below us, he said softly, "You make me see things differently, Emily." I didn't know how to answer that. So I just smiled and kept typing. By the third week I thought we were partners, not equals but something close. I told myself the money didn't matter. The title didn't matter. I was part of something real. But reality has a way of reminding you where you belong. It happened on a Wednesday night. The office was empty except for the sound of rain hitting the glass. I was alone, finishing a report while Alexander took a call in the hallway. My laptop froze, and I reached over to his desk to print a file from his system. That's when I saw it. An email, half hidden in his inbox, the subject line bold and sharp. Contingency plan H. My initials. First I thought it was a mistake. Maybe something legal. But curiosity, that same dangerous thing that had pulled me into this world, made me click. The message was from his lawyer. Or clinical. Should the audit fail or the press uncover any irregularities, we proceed with Protocol B. Assign responsibility to external consultant H. All digital trails to be adjusted accordingly. My breath caught in my throat. Assign responsibility to external consultant. They were planning to blame me, to make me their scapegoat. I reread it 3 times, my pulse pounding so hard I could barely hear. My name sat there like a ticking bomb. For a moment I couldn't move. The office lights flickered, casting thin stripes of shadow across the papers we'd worked on together. Our late nights, our shared laughter, the faint scent of his cologne still clinging to the chair beside mine. It all felt like a lie. Emily! His voice echoed from the hallway. I jumped, slamming the laptop shut just as he walked in. His smile was tired, almost soft. You're still here. I forced one of my own. Just finishing up. He nodded, stepping closer, hands in his pockets. You should rest. Tomorrow's going to be rough. The auditors are coming early. The words twisted in my stomach. Auditors, course. That was when Protocol B would come into play. Right, I said quietly. I'll be ready. He smiled again, gentle, trusting. And for a flicker of a second, I wondered if maybe he didn't know. Maybe the lawyer had acted on his own. Maybe. I was wrong. But I'd been poor too long to believe in maybes. When he left, I waited for the elevator doors to close before reopening his laptop. My hands shook as I hovered over the keyboard. The email was still there, black and white, undeniable. I took a screenshot, then another, and then, just as carefully, I deleted it. If this was a game, I'd learned the first rule. Don't let them see you panic. I backed up the screenshots to a hidden drive, my heart racing. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet, but I knew I wasn't walking blindly anymore. When I shut down the laptop, my reflection glimmered faintly in the dark screen. I didn't look like a waitress anymore. Or a consultant. I looked like someone caught between survival and revenge. As I gathered my bag, I heard footsteps again. I froze, but this time they didn't belong to him. It was her. His fiancée. She stepped into the office, her perfume slicing through the air like a blade. Working late, are we? She said smoothly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Just finishing some reports, I said, trying to sound casual. She glanced at the empty desk, at the faint glow of the laptop screen, then at me. Be careful, dear. You're in over your head here. I swallowed hard. Thanks for the warning. She leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. I'm not warning you. I'm reminding you. Everyone's replaceable. Then she turned and walked out, heels clicking against the marble floor. I waited until she was gone before letting out the breath I'd been holding. My hands trembled as I clutched my bag tighter. Whatever was happening inside this company, I was officially in the middle of it. And I wasn't going to be the one who went down. I deleted the email, but saved a copy. I never imagined that truth could sound like an explosion. But that's exactly how it felt. One headline, one photo, and suddenly the whole empire cracked open like glass under pressure. By morning, the world knew. Every channel screamed his name. Every screen flashed numbers in red. Reporters swarmed like vultures outside the glass tower that used to make me feel so small. Now it looked fragile, like one hard wind could bring it down. I didn't go in through the front that morning. Couldn't. Cameras waited there, desperate for blood and scandal. Instead, I slipped through the back entrance, clutching my badge like it was still worth something. Inside, the silence was worse than the noise outside. Phones rang unanswered. Desks were abandoned mid-meeting. Even the plants looked wilted under the fluorescent light. He was standing by the window when I found him. Sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, staring at the skyline that once belonged to him. His reflection looked like a ghost caught in daylight. I hesitated at the door. Mr. Hayes. He didn't turn. You shouldn't be here. I came to congratulate me. His voice was raw, a mix of fury and disbelief. Or watch me burn. The words hit like a slap. I took a step closer anyway. You think I did this? He finally turned, and the look in his eyes made my stomach twist. It wasn't just anger. It was betrayal, cold, hollow, and heavy. The files, he said quietly. The offshore accounts. You were the last one who had access. I felt the air leave my lungs. I didn't tell anyone. Then who did? His tone cracked like thunder. Who else even knew? I wanted to scream. To make him see the truth. That it wasn't me. That the woman he trusted in his bed was the one who'd sold him to the wolves. But how could I explain the envelope of cash, the whispers in the lobby, the way she smiled like she'd already won? I don't know, I whispered. And it was the truth. I didn't know exactly how deep her knife had gone, only that it was her hand that held it. He turned back to the window, jaw tight, hands gripping the edge of his desk. The city below us shimmered in chaos. Flashing cameras, police lights, smoke from somewhere nearby. She ruined you, I said softly. He laughed, but it wasn't a laugh. It was something sharp and broken. No, you ruined me. I trusted you. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I wanted to reach out to make him look at me, to remind him who had stayed up every night building the spreadsheets, fixing his messes, keeping his empire alive one decimal at a time. But he didn't want truth. He wanted someone to blame. Mr. Hayes, please, I started, but he cut me off with a wave of his hand. Get out. His voice was low, controlled, terrifying. Just listen. He slammed his fist on the desk. Get out. The sound echoed through the empty office, bouncing off the glass and steel until it felt like the whole building was shouting with him. I froze, staring at the man who once looked at me like I was something rare. Someone who saw beyond the uniform and the cheap coffee. Now I was just another mistake. Slowly I gathered my things. My hands shook as I slid my notebook into my bag, the same one he'd once teased me for carrying everywhere. I didn't look at him again. Couldn't. When I reached the door he spoke, softer this time, almost a whisper. I told you not to lie to me. The words followed me down the hallway, haunting, heavy. Outside the world was chaos. Cameras flashed, people shouted my name, asking questions I didn't have answers to. I walked straight through them, numb, the noise fading into a dull roar. Somewhere behind me the skyscraper. His skyscraper loomed like a wounded giant. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about his fall. It was about mine too. Because the truth wasn't just burning him alive. It was coming for me next. Cliffhanger. As I reached the street, my phone buzzed. One new message. From an unknown number. It read, "You were supposed to stay quiet." I thought I'd forgotten him. Or at least buried him somewhere between exhaustion and regret. But ghosts don't die. They just find quieter ways to haunt you. Weeks passed in silence. I went back to the diner because I had nowhere else to go. The smell of burnt coffee and old grease wrapped around me like an old blanket. Same cracked vinyl stools, same buzzing light that never got fixed. The world had collapsed somewhere else. Not here. No one asked where I'd been. They never do. People don't really want stories. They just want their coffee hot and their plates full. Still, I could feel it. The emptiness sitting across from me every morning. It had his shape. I'd see his name sometimes on TV, always followed by words like investigation, bankruptcy, and betrayal. They said he'd vanished after the scandal, that even his fiancée had disappeared with whatever was left of the money. Good for her, I thought once. Let her run. But deep down I knew he wasn't gone. Not yet. People like Mr. Hayes didn't just vanish. They retreated, waiting for the right moment to step back into the light. Still, I didn't expect that moment to happen there. It was a Tuesday, the kind of morning where rain couldn't decide if it wanted to fall or not. The bell above the door jingled softly, and I didn't even look up at first. The diner was half empty, the same old crowd. Truckers, teachers, silence. Then I heard a voice. Black coffee. No sugar. My heart stopped. I looked up, and for a second my brain refused to believe it. No suit. No bodyguards. No Rolex. Just a man. His hair was longer, streaked with gray. His shoulders seemed smaller somehow. His confidence stripped down to something human. He looked tired. "Mr. Hayes," I whispered before I could stop myself. He gave a faint smile, the kind that hurt more than any apology could. "Haven't heard that name in a while." I poured the coffee, hands trembling slightly. "You shouldn't be here." "Maybe not," he said quietly. "But I needed to see you." The rain finally decided to fall then, soft and steady against the windows. It filled the silence between us. He took a sip of the coffee, winced, and laughed under his breath. "Still terrible." I almost smiled. Almost. Some things never change. He looked at me then, really looked. Not like a boss, not like a man defending his empire. Just a person trying to find something familiar in a world that had stopped making sense. "I was wrong," he said finally. Froze. "About what?" "Everything." His voice cracked a little. "About money, trust you." I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat wouldn't work. He set the cup down, fingers tracing the rim absently. "You told me once that people matter more than profits. I thought you were naive. Turns out, you were the only one in the room who wasn't." For a long time I said nothing. The diner hummed quietly around us. Coffee machines hissing, forks clinking, rain tapping the glass. "I didn't betray you," I said finally, barely above a whisper. He nodded. "I know. Found the emails. The transfers. She was behind all of it." My stomach twisted. "And the others?" "Gone," he said simply. "Every one of them. Took what they could and ran." There was a silence then, not awkward, just heavy. Like everything we'd both been carrying had finally settled between us. "I lost everything," he said after a while. "The company. Penthouse. The life I thought I built." I studied his face. No anger, no arrogance, just exhaustion. "What do you want from me?" I asked quietly. He looked down, then reached into the worn leather satchel beside him. "Not what you think." He slid a plain brown folder across the counter. "What is this?" He hesitated. "Closure." I stared at it, afraid to open it, afraid of what it might mean. "I can't take this," I said, pushing it back. "Yes, you can." His tone softened. "Because you earned it. 'Cause I never thanked you. Because you're the only person who ever told me the truth when everyone else was selling me lies." My throat burned. I wanted to be angry, to throw his words back at him, but all I felt was tired. "Why now?" I asked. He looked toward the window, watching the rain blur the world outside. "Because I don't know how much longer I'll be around." The air went still. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Just smiled, that same faint, tragic smile. "Let's just say, I've made peace with some bad decisions." Something cold ran through me. "You're sick." He didn't deny it. "I wanted to leave something behind that wasn't broken," he said softly. "Something that still matters." He stood, placing a few bills on the counter, more than enough for coffee. Then he turned to leave. "Wait," I said, my voice shaking. "What's in the folder?" He paused at the door, glancing back with that same sad calm in his eyes. "The final word," he said. "It's yours now." The bell above the door jingled as he stepped into the rain, coat collar pulled high, disappearing into the gray morning. I stood there for what felt like hours before I finally opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. At the top, his signature. And beneath it, the deed to the diner. Cliffhanger. My hands trembled as I read the name again, and realized the diner wasn't just mine now. It was our story written in ink. But something told me this wasn't the end of him. Not yet. I used to think money was the answer to everything, that if I had enough of it, I could rewrite the story of who I was. But now I know the truth. Money can't erase pain or pride, or the mistakes that leave stains on your soul. Can only buy silence. And I was done being silent. After he left that morning, I sat in the diner long after closing. The rain had stopped, but the world outside still looked washed out. Pale, uncertain, fragile. The deed lay in front of me. His signature etched in heavy black ink. My name beside it felt unreal. For hours, I traced the letters with my fingertips, over and over, until the paper began to soften beneath my touch. He'd given me something no one else ever had. Not money, not opportunity, but respect. The kind that comes when someone finally sees you for who you are. I reopened the diner 6 weeks later. New paint. New sign. Same heart. The old neon flicker was replaced with warm golden light, and above the door, the new name glowed softly. Second Chance Cafe. People noticed. Not because it was fancy, but because it felt different. There was laughter again, not the hollow kind, the real kind that fills a room and lingers. I hired waitresses who were like me once. Single mothers, students, people who'd been told they weren't worth more than their paycheck. Paid them fairly. I listened to them. And every morning, I wiped down the same counter where my story had begun. The first Sunday after reopening, I was refilling the sugar jars when the bell over the door chimed. For a moment I froze. Then I heard it, that soft, familiar voice. Black coffee. No sugar. Turned. There he was. Mr. Hayes. No, Daniel, standing in the doorway, sunlight catching the gray in his hair. He looked different. Lighter. Like someone who'd finally stopped fighting his own shadow. Smiled just a little. We don't serve billionaires here anymore. He chuckled low and easy. Good. I left him behind. I poured his coffee. The same chipped mug he'd used that last day before everything changed. He took a sip, and this time he didn't wince. Still terrible, he said softly. Still honest, I replied. He smiled. We didn't talk about the past. Not the scandal, not the fiancé. Not the headlines that had devoured his empire. We didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. But as the months passed, he kept coming back. Every Sunday, same time, same seat. Sometimes he read the newspaper. Sometimes he just watched the morning light stretch across the floor. He never ordered anything else. Just coffee. Black. No sugar. First people whispered. They recognized him. The man who'd fallen from grace, sitting in a small-town cafe like any other lost soul. But over time the whispers faded. He became part of the place, another regular face among the morning crowd. One Sunday, I found him staring at the sign above the counter. Second chance, he murmured. You always were better with words than I was. I laughed softly. It's what we all want, isn't it? He looked at me, eyes soft, almost grateful. Some of us just need someone to believe we deserve it. That line stayed with me for days. Because he wasn't talking about himself. He was talking about me. I'd spent years believing I was small. That the diner was a cage. Not a beginning. But somewhere between serving him coffee and watching him crumble, I'd learned something vital. Dignity doesn't come from what you have. It comes from what you survive. Weeks turned into months, and the cafe grew busier. Tourists stopped by, locals brought their families, and every story that entered through that door seemed to echo my own in some way. People rebuilding, people trying again, and every Sunday morning I'd see him sitting there. Quiet, steady, content. Sometimes we'd talk, sometimes we wouldn't. Once he looked at me over his mug and said, "Do you ever regret not taking more from me?" I shook my head. "You already gave me everything I needed." He frowned slightly. "What's that?" "The chance to prove who I really was." He smiled then, the kind of smile that told me he finally understood what I meant that first day in the diner when he'd asked, "What would you do with $1 billion?" I didn't answer back then, not really. I just told him something about people and purpose. But now, standing in the cafe I owned, watching the morning light touch faces full of hope, I knew my real answer. I'd build something that couldn't be bought. The last time he came in, he looked friendlier. His hands trembled a little when he lifted his cup. But his eyes were peaceful. "I won't be around much longer," he said quietly. "Doctors say it's time to slow down." I swallowed hard. "You already have." He laughed, soft and raspy. "Maybe. But I wanted to thank you before I go." I wanted to tell him not to talk like that, not to leave, but the words stuck somewhere behind my ribs. Instead, I nodded. "You already have, Daniel. Every Sunday." He smiled, small, tired, real. "Keep the place going. Promise me that." "I promise." He stood, left a few bills on the table like always, and walked to the door. He paused, hand resting on the frame, and turned back one last time. "You were right, you know," he said softly. "Money comes and goes. But peace stays if you let it." Then he left. That was the last time I ever saw him. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address, no signature. Inside was a single note in his handwriting. "For the woman who taught me what wealth really means." And tucked behind it, a small gold coin engraved with the words, "Worth more than money." I still keep it under the counter beside the coffee mugs. Every morning when I open the cafe, I touch it once, a quiet reminder of everything I've lost and everything I've found. Because the truth is, he didn't just save me. We saved each other. Ending emotion. Bittersweet redemption, quiet justice, poetic closure. He lost billions. Found purpose. And somewhere in the middle of it all, between a billionaire's fall and a waitress's rise, we both learned the same thing. Some riches can't be counted, only felt.